Welcome to the Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, we built this city on rocky roads. This is Mortal Engines. Welcome to the Blast Zone.
Welcome to the Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like Mortal Engines, which we will sadly be talking about today. But before we get into that, Ian, how are you doing this week?
Well, you know, despite my ongoing physical and mental exhaustion, I may be able to point to something good this week, and that's that my body seems to be getting a little stronger.
Oh.
I've been doing teeny tiny little workouts, and I seem to be growing teeny tiny little muscles. And it's nice when you see a little progress. It's inspiration to keep going. So it's just early stages, but trying to bring something positive to the show this week.
I believe the technical term for that is noob gains.
Oh, okay.
Where in your first few weeks of working out or first few months, you start to see a difference. And it's a good way to stay motivated because it will plateau after a little while, but then it will start going up again after a while.
We'll see if I keep at it for a while.
It's a marathon, not a sprint. Exercises is what I've learned.
Yeah.
It's more about consistency than anything else. I could point to something positive this week too, and it's that I'll probably never have to watch Mortal Engines again.
Oh, yes. That's a nice one.
But I've had a good week so far. I went golfing today, which I'm not a golfer.
Okay.
I've only been 3 or 4 times in my life, but it was a good company.
Nice.
Enjoyed the time there and played terribly. Got sunburned, which is not my favorite thing, but
not the most fun part.
You could see my nice farmer's tan there.
Oh, yeah. Real golf tan.
I feel like when I get sunburned to this degree, it just like saps my energy. I don't know if that's a common feeling.
Oh, it certainly does for me. Yeah. Any kind of like outdoor exposure, especially were there any beverages involved in this golf outing?
Just one.
Okay.
I had one beer. I'm not a big drinker on the golf course because it's fucking hot. And the sun's beating down on my stupid bald head. It's just not a great feeling.
Yeah. Sunshine by itself will knock me out, but sunshine and beer will absolutely flatten me.
I mean, sunshine and beer when you're in like an Adirondack chair is one thing, but when you're actually like active, it's not a great combination. Still had fun and exciting news. I can say this because by the time this episode comes out, it will have happened already, but I'm throwing my wife, Jamie, a surprise birthday party tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
She doesn't know about it, but she'll obviously know about it by the time she listens to this episode.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Jamie. Please tell her.
Will do. We've got like 30 of her friends coming.
Oh, wow. You went big.
Yeah, we're doing it at a bar. They're reserving a big section for us. Not like a big table. Like I don't like those type of parties where everyone sits down and has a meal. I was like, no, like people want to mingle and
cool. That sounds great. You're a good husband.
I'm trying, man. She's a better wife than I am a husband.
Oh,
gotta try to step up once in a while.
Well, I hope it's a lot of fun.
I'm sure it will be. How could it not be? But why don't you tell me what you watched this week that you wanted to tell the listeners about?
I pulled an oldie out. I watched a little movie called The Matrix from 1999. It had been a really long time since I watched the original. I don't know. I just saw it getting brought up in different places and I got inspired. And it's still really fun. For how groundbreaking it's known to be in many ways, what surprised me about coming back to it after so long is just how traditional the action can be in it. Yeah, there's bullet time. There's all this innovative visual stuff. But the set pieces in it are like stock action stuff. Just like shoot your way into this building and rescue this dude. And so I don't know, I kind of like that about it, how it's not as head in the clouds as maybe you remember it being from the way it gets talked about.
The sequels, I think, leaned hard onto that more like existentialist tilt that the first one certainly has, but it's not like the focal point. But every time I go back to it, I'm always a little surprised at how weird it is in some ways. The scene with his mouth disappearing in the interrogation, that's a scary fucking scene.
That's really scary.
And then you remember that it is rated R, which is like easy to forget.
It comes early when you don't know what the movie is. And then you're like, holy shit, this is a straight ass horror movie, like psychological horror. And then it's really not that movie the rest of the time. But yeah, that scene sets you off. It's a great way to throw you for a loop and get your mind in a vulnerable place for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it's still a crowning achievement by the Wachowskis. I don't think the sequels were nearly as good. And I don't think that's a hot take or anything, but I don't think it diminishes the power of the first. You're proving now you can go back to it and still enjoy it just as much.
It's a really cool movie. And I thought it'd be fun to bring this week because Hugo Weaving's in our movie this week, and his Agent Smith in that first movie is just still an all-time great movie villain.
Mr. Anderson.
His delivery, everything is so corny. It's way cornier than his character Thaddeus Valentine in this week's movie Mortal Engines, but at the same time, it's so much more compelling. He's chewing the scenery, but in this beautiful way, and thankfully, it helps me remember that I really quite like Hugo Weaving, despite what this movie does to drag him down.
Yeah, he'll always be Elrond first to me.
Okay,
I know Agent Smith came first, but he's got very elf-like features. I feel like he embodied the picture of an elder elf quite well. He's got a real authority and gravitas to him, which they tried to use to great effect in this movie, but it did not quite pay off.
I'm not going to say he's bad in this movie. We'll get into it. He's probably on the good side of things, as few as the good things are that we'll be able to pick out. He's a decent one.
There's nothing bad about his performance here. So the character and the motivations and blah, 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 all that good stuff. But I watched a new movie. You watched an old movie. I watched a new one. We didn't plan this, but it worked out nicely. I checked out the new entry into this recent onslaught of corporate branding docudramas.
Have you heard the term Pic?
Pic. Oh, okay. Is that new?
Yeah, it's like biopic, but I don't even know how you pronounce it. I'm saying Pic?
Pic.
Biographical product movies.
So we had Tetris, which I enjoyed. We have Blackberry, which I have not watched yet. And then we most recently got Flamin' Hot, the story of how Flamin' Hot Cheetos were invented, quote unquote. And I say quote unquote because this movie just makes up stuff left and right, which is fine. I don't need this type of story to be 100% accurate. I'm a fan of Flamin' Hot Cheetos and all its iterations. So I was like, yeah, I'll check this out. It's well made. It's entertaining. The lead is very charming and it's got some great performances. Dennis Haysbert puts in a great performance. There's Matt Walsh, famous comedic actor. Pops up in there. It toes the line between drama and comedy pretty well, but it also does, it's very patting Frito-Lay on the back at every turn. Like, look at how open-minded we were. We listened to this little Mexican guy. He's not even white, but we heard his ideas and like we did it anyway. And now when you start fabricating things to make the corporation look better, not to make it a better story. Now I'm kind of out on this, you know? Like we're flubbing the facts to make Frito-Lay look like they were ahead of the curve on this thing. I mean, actually, to their credit, they were more ahead of the curve than the movie gives them credit for. Flamin' Hot Cheetos were already being tested in certain markets when this employee started working there.
Oh, okay.
And the movie makes a big show of him like coming up with the spice blend for it. And it's like, clearly that's not accurate if they were already on the shelves.
That's weird.
He was just given well, I don't want to spoil it for people. Can you spoil a nonfiction movie? You can if it's actually fiction. And
I could spoil it.
I don't know. I feel like Tetris, at least, and from what I've read, Blackberry are a little more, they're less congratulatory towards corporations. And this one just felt like a 2-hour-long Frito-Lay commercial.
Yeah, that's weird. That's kind of exactly what you would worry that the Pics would become. Like, it's fun to have a tongue-in-cheek one, a satirical one, or one that takes a hard look at these companies and their products. But to have one that's just like a rah-rah booster thing is kind of weird, even for a product that you might have nothing but good feelings for, like your snack makers.
Yeah, I'm sure Frito-Lay is evil in some way. I'm going to find out they overthrew the government of Peru or something, like Nestle. So I don't want to pat them on the back too much, but they make a tasty product.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with Flamin' Hot Cheetos, or even regular Cheetos, crunchy though. Don't give me puffy Cheetos. I don't want that.
I do like the puffs, Chester's Puffs.
You like the puffs?
Yeah.
Man, I like the cheese balls, which I guess are just the puffs in a different shape. But those aren't Frito-Lay. They're just store brand cheese balls in the big tub.
Sure, yeah. Or like Utz brand.
Do you remember the Cheetos checkerboards?
No.
Imagine like a waffle fry.
That sounds good.
It was interesting. It was maybe a little too much. Like you couldn't, part of the joy of eating Cheetos is like dipping your hand in the bag and pulling out a handful. You couldn't pull out a handful of these. Like,
they were like big pumps.
They were a little too big. They were the size of waffle fries. So you're not going to pull out a handful of waffle fries and stuff in your mouth. I'll see if I can find them. I'll put a picture of them in the show notes.
Cool. I want to see that.
They're definitely not called like Cheetos checkerboards. I'm sure if I Google, wait, I found them. Cheetos Checkers. Yeah.
There you go.
That was pretty close. They look more like Dominoes than like a checkerboard though.
Okay.
They're about that size and shape.
All right.
But enough about Cheetos. Let's talk about Mortal Engines, brought to you by the filmmakers of Lord of the Rings in some capacity, as all the marketing love to mention. Do you remember when this movie came out?
From the time when it came out in theaters, I think I can picture Hester's red scarf on the poster, and that's about it from the actual theatrical release. And then when it came to streaming, I do remember trying to turn it on one time. I can't remember what I heard that caused me to say, oh, maybe I should check this out. But what I remember is bombing out really quick. Like the opening chase scene of this movie, it made me so mad so fast that I turned the movie off within 5 minutes.
And then I was like, guess what? You have to watch it now.
So I stuck it out this time. It was challenging.
I remember being excited for this movie when I first started seeing trailers and marketing material. materials. I was like the concept, like the people involved. The visuals look cool. Mysterious girl with a scarf, always fun. Scarves are great accessories.
Why not?
And then I think the reviews were just so toxic by the time it got released that I kind of was like, okay, I'll file that one as missed opportunity. But I mean, one of my favorite books is The Scar by China Miéville, which has kind of a similar setup, except it's like combined with Waterworld. They're floating cities.
Oh, okay.
Instead of being like these massive contraptions, like in Mortal Engines, they're just several individual boats all tied together, which is a little more believable. Not believable, makes a little more sense. So I think that was part of why I was interested in this. And then if you go back and watch the trailer, this movie had a pretty good trailer. A lot of like good stuff in the trailer that didn't make it in the movie, which is surprising considering it's a pretty long movie. Also, there's not a lot of good stuff in it. So they could have really padded that good stuff time with some of those scenes from the trailer, but it came and went and I barely thought about it again until it just pops up on these lists of the biggest bombs of all time. But even on those lists, like the little blurb is just like, you could tell the person writing it never even saw it.
Oh,
like this movie from Peter Jackson's Weta Workshop studio was a big money loser for the studio. But like they don't say anything about the movie. Like they clearly have no idea. It's just such a forgotten movie so soon after it's released.
It's strange. It's really forgettable. And this time, often I do check reviews to check my own sanity after I watch a movie. I don't like to do it before I watch, but after I watch a movie, I'm like, this is how this movie hit me. Did it hit other people the same way? And I don't like to hate movies. I'm like, I'm really hating this thing. Is it me? And I should have read the reviews, but I didn't. I was actually so turned off by this movie. I was begrudgingly doing all my homework this time, and I didn't spend any time reading reviews. But I think that it offended me for those really raw storytelling reasons, which I think are the right reasons, right? Like all the pieces are there. You try to break it down and go, what's wrong with it? And you go, well, I don't know. It has all the things. It has the plot and the visuals and the setting and all that's.
Does it have the visuals?
We can argue about that, but it just offends you because it's not fun.
No.
It's like you don't care about the people. You aggressively start not caring about the people. And then when you feel like that about the characters, there's just no way to dig out of that hole.
9 out of every 10 minutes in this movie feels like homework. And we were talking off mic about this, but what I settled on and what I don't like about this movie is that it is plotted and really feels like the middle chapter of a trilogy that we never got to see the first and the third one of. It kind of throws you into this world with a little explanation, which I can be a fan of in the right setting. But then it continues to like pile lore, side characters, and everything on top of this kind of, you're already thrown into this world you don't really understand. It makes no effort to explain it to you, but then it just keeps throwing new shit on top of it that doesn't matter.
Yes.
It's like, are you setting up a sequel that's not going to happen? Or are you just trying to appease maybe people that read the book? But this wasn't like Lord of the Rings. It wasn't The Hunger Games. It wasn't even like Aragon. I don't remember this book. And I was the right age to be reading this type of book when it was released in 2001. So I think they maybe overestimated what they were dealing with.
So I took like a full 180 on what I think is wrong with this movie from my first watch to my second watch. And usually I warm up. So I'm like, I hated it the first time. I'm like, let me watch it again. Maybe I'll feel better about it. And I don't feel really better about it, but I have a very different analysis of it. So let me quickly try to summarize before we jump into the details. On the first pass watching this movie, I was like, nothing makes sense. They didn't set anything up. Just like what you're saying, every plot turn feels like something brand new is dropped in your lap. And now like, hey, guess what? This is the most important thing in this world. And this is the most important thing in the story. And we just found out about it. And it's an hour in and it's 90 minutes in. And then the second time, everything made more sense. And I'm like, wait, oh, they did set everything up. There's actually like too much setup. That was my conclusion in the end. There's too much setup. It's too dense. And because you don't care about the characters, you can't listen to what they're saying. But there's so many lines and little throwaway things that are dropped that explain huge swaths of the story later on. Stuff that I thought was like, that's not in there. They just threw this whole like mystical city at the end that's like the ultimate goal for everybody. And we didn't even know about it until almost the end of the movie. No, we did. It's just that they dropped a hint about it in one throwaway line because they had so much setup to do that everybody just gets one little line. The shield wall, the Medusa thing, the crash drive, they're all in there at the beginning. And I had no idea they were in there the first time because I just couldn't parse and I didn't want to parse what these characters were trying to tell me in the first part of the movie because I didn't like them.
Yeah, I think it's not your fault or my fault if we miss some of those details. It's bad writing, bad directing. This movie is far too reverent to a book that frankly I don't think that many people cared about. Like just buy the rights, sure, and just make a good movie out of it.
Yeah, I think it's either reverence or just a blind spot. And you can I started to have sympathy for the filmmaker's blind spot. It's like, once you know what all this stuff means, I can sympathize with them going, well, we put it all in there. No, you can connect every one of those dots. And her mom was actually part of this rebellious anti-traction group. And this device was actually the thing that was lost here. And we said that at the beginning, so you should know it all. And it's like, yeah, but you just can't absorb it. And maybe it's, I don't know.
It's like giving someone a sandwich that's encased in amber and being like, what do you mean you're hungry? I gave you a sandwich. Yeah, sure. Technically, but it's impenetrable.
Hard to chew on that.
It's not the best metaphor.
No, but I'm trying to chew on the metaphor. It's very interesting to picture an amber-coated sandwich.
We were talking a lot about the specific things we don't like about the movie, but we haven't even gotten to the monologue yet. Should I get into that?
Yeah. Why don't you let us know how they got this thing rolling?
Oh boy. Here we go. In 2001, British author Philip Reeve published Mortal Engines, his post-apocalyptic, young adult, science fantasy steampunk novel set roughly 1,000 years in the future, where cities now move and engage in something called municipal Darwinism, with the stronger cities overtaking the weaker ones and stripping them of their resources. Peter Jackson was a fan and purchased the film rights for the movie in 2009, though getting production off the ground was a slow process. The script was written by Jackson and his writing partners Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens, which maybe felt like good news, except for the fact that Jackson hasn't written or made a great movie since Return of the King.
You have no power here.
Principal photography wouldn't begin until April of 2017, with Jackson's longtime collaborator Christian Rivers making his directorial debut, though you'd be forgiven for thinking Jackson directed it, given how all the marketing materials describe it as from the filmmakers of Lord of the Rings. Production was a messy endeavor studio-wise, as Universal Pictures, MRC, Legendary Pictures, Perfect World Pictures, and Wingnut Films were all stakeholders. Their combined cachet earned a budget of $150 million, which is pretty insane considering it was a first-time director adapting a 17-year-old, mostly forgotten young adult novel.
To be a 17-year-old, mostly forgotten young adult again.
The cast was made up of actors mostly unknown in America, with Hera Hilmar, Robert Sheehan, and Jihae starring. Only Hugo Weaving was a recognizable face for most audiences, unless you count Stephen Lang, but they just used his voice. With a holiday blockbuster release of December 14th, 2018 set, the movie had a tall hill to climb to make money. It failed in a way so spectacular, I'm shocked this movie doesn't get brought up more, along with movies like Heaven's Gate and John Carter.
More soon.
It debuted in 5th place, taking in just over $7.5 million, and it would only get worse from there. It dropped an astounding 77% in its second week, eventually closing out its domestic run with just $15 million, or 10% of its budget. It fared a little better internationally, but not much, eventually taking in just over $80 million worldwide. It's reported to have lost about $175 million for Universal Pictures, but unlike a lot of the other movies we cover, it's no cult classic, it's mostly just forgotten.
Yeah, I guess that makes me feel better because, like I said, I get anxious when I hate a movie. I'm like, I'm fucking up. I'm hating something. I shouldn't be a hateful person. And then you see it came out of the gate and just nosedived. Nobody liked it.
It made $1.7 million in its second week on 3,000 screens.
That's crazy.
That is a super wide release. You can't get any wider than that.
Yeah.
That's a per theater average of $342. I'm no box office business analyst, but I don't think that's very good.
People must have been aggressively calling up all their friends. Stay
Don't watch
home.
this movie.
Get out of there. Don't go to this movie.
I don't think we've ever seen a 77% drop week to week. That's insane.
Yeah, it's usually like in the 50s, right? That's pretty normal.
I think a good drop is 30s.
Okay.
It used to be 40s. Now 50s is pretty average. But once you get up into the high 50s or the 60s, you're like, oh, like this movie must have had terrible word of mouth. To see 77% and $1.7 million on a $150 million movie in its second week is just blows my mind.
I can't believe nobody liked it. There wasn't some audience who was like into this, fooled by this, or just won over by the visuals and the sort of broad strokes of it. Because it is drawn in pretty broad strokes. Characters are kind of thin. The plot points are all kind of tropey, but I don't know, that works fine for a lot of people, especially the younger audience that this is geared towards. So I would think that somebody would just go into the theater and be like, yeah, that was fine.
I don't know. That's the thing. I wonder if this movie was marketed towards younger audiences, because I was intrigued by the trailer and stuff, and I was no young adult when this movie came out. I was an adult.
Yeah.
So maybe that was part of the problem, is like they couldn't attract the kids because it looked a little too grim and a little too serious. And they couldn't attract the adults because it looked a little too childish and a little too to by the numbers.
If I was in charge and I knew what I had in this movie, I would at least be, pitching towards that Hunger Games Divergent type of crowd, because that really feels like what this cast of characters is trying to hook onto.
I think they also arrived at a point where like people were kind of over the young adult thing. If we look at, we talked about it a little bit when we were covering, was it RIPD, where the director ended up doing the third Divergent movie, and that one bombed too. I think that one came out in 2018 as well. So it might have just been a little bit of a 2016 was when Allegiant came out, which was the second Divergent movie.
Okay.
Or the third. I don't remember. Yeah, Robert Schwenke. That bombed too in 2016. So people were probably a little, the Hunger Games had released 4 movies in 8 years? Like it was a lot, and they were so successful, but
they just missed the window. And you talked about
they just missed the window.
Like Peter Jackson had it, acquired it early enough, but he couldn't get it finished in time, and he kind of missed his opportunity.
It seems like he almost did it as a favor for one of his like long-standing collaborators. I have this property. Why don't you direct it? But there are some first-time director foibles in here.
I guess it's hard to know who to blame. And we always don't worry about that too much. We just make up our own victims.
It doesn't even feel like there was a director. It feels like it was directed by AI or something. There's just I don't feel any agency or like choices in any of the shots that like a director would be like, this is a cool shot.
That's a good point. There's not almost a lot of character to it.
It's almost like he was directing it and was like scared to go too far. So he was like, I'll just frame everything in the center of the shot, and we'll have like pretty standard shot lengths and cuts and everything. Like it's just a very first time director movie.
We're just postulating, but I could see that kind of attitude coming from being given the huge budget, being handed the reins by big man on campus, Peter Jackson, and being like, I gotta not fuck this up, but also thinking like, I'm making kind of a young adult movie. There's boundaries. Maybe this director didn't have a strong sense of what young adults love. So he's just like, let me just keep it safe, make safe choices, and it'll work. And it just doesn't really work.
It kind of reminded me of Warcraft in that sense of,
yes,
there was like a timidness to the filmmaking that really hurt it.
And there's one thing, and we'll probably get to it. There's one character, the scary bad guy Shrike, who is the only guy. He rules. He rules. He has attitude. His story has weird, unusual choices in it. And he has what I would say are like interesting stylistic director choices to it. And it's the only place it happens. Because now you talked about the timid choices. Shrike does weird things. He shows up in a fight and he plows his head through the low ceiling just to get into a room quicker. And it's like, that was a weird, funny thing that a character would do. And somebody had to have the vision for that. But there's almost nothing else that has that kind of vision to it. It's weird. It's just limited to this one character.
Yeah. I mean, let's start talking about the movie so we can bring up some of these observations with a little more context.
Here we go. Let's dive in. In a post-op. Oh, let me try that again.
In a post-op.
It's hard to say. In a post-op. Hold on.
I hope you leave some of this in.
I need a sip of water.
You want to switch it up? You want me to go first? And you go second?
No, I'm going to conquer this. In a post-apocalyptic future, Earth's natural resources are so scarce that cities have uprooted themselves and have become giant mobile scavenging machines. London is the largest and most predatory of these rolling cities. Our story begins when imperious Deputy Mayor Thaddeus Valentine, played by Hugo Weaving, directs the city of London to chase down and gobble up a small Bavarian mining town. Amongst the townsfolk brought on board is a mysterious scarred woman named Hester Shaw, played by Hera Hilmar. Hester has come seeking to kill Valentine and avenge her mother. Hester attacks Valentine, but she's thwarted by a helpful bystander, apprentice historian Tom Natsworthy, played by Robert Sheehan. After a chase, Hester informs Tom that Valentine is evil and that he killed her mother. And then she jumps down a chute and off of London into the wilds far below. When Valentine finds out what Tom heard, he pushes Tom down the same chute. Now, Tom and Hester are stranded together in the desolate hunting grounds where scavengers and predatory machines roam.
Everything in this first section is like very gray, and I wonder if that was to cover up some shoddy CGI, but I found myself incredibly bored by the visuals, which is not what you want out of a movie with this kind of far left premise.
Yeah, I was thrown by the sci-fi concept, which we'll have to talk about, the steampunkiness of it all, but I actually thought there was some cool visuals. Like, I liked the way that this hunting ground was generic landscape, but it had been so thoroughly chewed up with these giant caterpillar track marks, like truly giant, because they carry things like the city of London. That in itself was interesting.
I have my issues with that too, though.
We'll have to hash that out too. But there's some big sweeping CGI shots circling around London, and some of that worked for me. I'm like, I'm okay with some of these visuals.
But there's like a TARDIS effect to the cities, because when they're on street level or following a character as they roam around the city, you're like, wow, this feels like a really huge moving city. And then all the exteriors are like, wow, that's a really big tank. Like, it's the size of a cruise ship, but that's not the size of London, you know?
No.
Like, they're big, but they're not big enough. And like, I think if you made them any bigger, it would be silly. And that's because the whole idea is very silly.
The idea is silly, yes. Yeah, you got right to it. And when I talked to you about this in prep for the show, I'm like, this movie's really weird. There's like this hard sci-fi detail, and they spent this effort to make the CGI and show you all this mechanical stuff. And yet there's this fairy tale, light, magical reality thing that where like, you can't have something the size of a city just kind of swivel around and drive around real fast. And you're like, yeah, that sounds like the definition of steampunk.
And you watch people on the streets of London, and they're not like bouncing up and down and shaking all the time. They're just like...
They didn't really deal with that. There's a big fantasy element that you have to swallow, that these things are quasi-magical. It's like a fairy tale storybook. They're like, oh, and then the city sprouted legs and it walked away. Yeah, that's silly. We've
all seen Howl's Moving Castle, I hope.
Yeah.
Great movie.
It is like Howl's Castle, but like a lot bigger, but sometimes not that much bigger.
I would like to give the movie some props with a caveat that I'm not sure it knew it was doing this. I find the idea of the city of London traveling around the world and just absorbing and subjugating other cultures a very like nuanced point that the movie's trying to make. But I also don't know if the movie realizes it's making that point with the Museum of London and the city. Like, there could have been some jokes like hidden in there about the UK's history of colonialism, but it doesn't really grapple with that. So I don't know if it's just a little hidden detail for people to laugh at, or if they fully didn't realize what they were saying.
That's a good point. There's definitely some inherent commentary built into it, but it would have been much sharper if they would have made a little nod to that. Instead, they went for this other angle, which is focused on how out of touch they were, because it takes place 1,000 years in the future, and there's like really out of touch with our present day culture.
They drop a minion joke in there that lands like a fucking ton of bricks.
It's not even hardly a joke. They're just like, oh, our ancient deities are going to topple over, and they go to save these statues, and it's two minions.
Banana. In the book, I guess it was Mickey Mouse and like Pluto, which is more believable because there is like a reverence towards Disney that I think even fans of the Despicable Me movies don't feel towards them.
This was more like silly, just like mistaken future archaeologists latching onto dumb stuff, which is a funny joke, but it's fairly out of place in the movie. A lot of the other references to the ancient tech is deadly serious because it's about finding these weapons that are the heart of the jeopardy of the main storyline, except for one other joke where like she finds a Twinkie and she's like, the food of the ancients can never spoil. It's fine. Eat it. It's 1,000 years old, and they eat it all Twinkie.
That was the old rumor, right? They would never go bad.
Yeah, which is more funny, jokey stuff, but that also doesn't land because it feels so out of place in the movie.
It's funny watching this as I also watch Silo. They tread in some similar territory.
Yeah, that's true. That's wild.
A lot of the ancient tech, they call them relics in Silo, but it's the same thing. Like an old shitty like Seagate hard drive that cost $30. They're like, what have you found?
That's funny. I didn't even make that connection.
I made a note when I was watching this movie in the first section that I hadn't started doing any research into this yet. I was like, I'm just going to watch it blind.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, if this is not based on a young adult book, I will eat my shoe, is what my note says. Luckily, I do not have to eat my shoe because I was correct in my assumption.
That's actually was the first thing in my notes too. I did not vow to eat any objects of clothing, but I was like, is this YA? And then I was like, yeah. In the worst way. It's one thing to go, oh, wait a minute, all the main characters are young. You go, oh, maybe this was YA, but it's just kind of cookie cutter. Like they've got their little squabbles. They're being unfairly persecuted. There's some sparks between the boys and the girls. There's some mommy daddy issues. And then it's sort of, well, you're cheating young people because they lead rich emotional lives too. And it's like these characters are so cutouts. Like Tom, who's one of the heroes. It's Hester's movie, but Tom is right there with her.
I mean, we start the movie with Tom. Like we don't even know Hester exists till 20 minutes in.
We see her, but she doesn't say a damn word for a long time.
We don't know what her
see
deal
her face.
is.
She's just a red scarf lady with a scowl. I don't know what to make of her, but we hear Tom talk quite a bit, and he's just like such an average dude. And like his personality is that he has these Boy Scout badges on the lapel of his jacket, and that's pretty much the lasting impression you get about him. It's like, oh, it's young adult. They have like cute fantasy clothing choices that kids can try to replicate in their cosplay.
And like, we're not bashing YA when we say these things. We're just saying that this is a very lazy version of it.
Yeah, no, if it's done well, like there's a bunch of book series that I've read, sci-fi and fantasy books, where I've get through a bunch of them like, hold on a minute, am I reading YA? This is really good. So yeah, I'm not against it as a genre.
And even the Hunger Games movies showed you can get a little weirder. By the end of that series, they were like kind of moving away from the YA stuff. But even in the first one, just look at the costume Stanley Tucci and Woody Harrelson and Elizabeth Banks are wearing. And that it's weird. It's interesting. It draws your eye. There's none of that here. It's all Everyone's dressed in these very kind of,
It goes halfway there.
we have to represent our culture that you're not going to learn about. Like, it doesn't matter, but also we need you to know that I'm with this guy over here. So we have to dress alike.
The fancy people have bright velvet jackets in some sort of faux historical styles, but they're not unique and interesting like that Hunger Games stuff.
All right. That's all I got for the first section. Should we move on, or do you have any other notes?
Yeah, no, let's plow on through.
Is that another?
No, that was just, I just want to plow through this episode.
All right. Alone together in the perilous hunting grounds, Hester is at first reluctant to befriend Tom, but the two start to form a bond as they help each other survive. They're pursued by scavengers until they're rescued by a friendly older couple, but it turns out the couple has actually taken them captive. Tom has a chance to escape alone, but he chooses to stay behind with Hester. In the meantime, Valentine knows that Hester will keep coming for him, so he ventures to a remote prison where he sets loose a cyborg zombie named Shrike, played by Stephen Lang, to hunt down and kill Hester. Elsewhere, Tom and Hester are brought to a slave auction where a mysterious woman named Anna Fang shoots her way through the slavers to try and free Hester. Then Hester and Tom's escape is complicated when Shrike arrives and nearly tears Fang's airship to the ground. But Hester risks it all to make sure Tom isn't left behind, and they escape aboard Fang's airship together. As Fang takes them to meet her allies in the floating city of Airhaven, Hester explains her relationship with Shrike. After her mother died, Shrike found her and raised her like a father. And the reason Shrike is after her now is because he promised to kill her and make her into an emotionless zombie like himself, so she will no longer have to feel sadness. Sweet of him.
I hope that sounds as silly and weird as sweet as it did to us, because that's the fun part of the movie. That's the only interesting original shit that's in here.
I love Shrike. He fucking rules. He's crazy and weird.
And scary, and he's genuinely menacing. They just made a lot of good choices with him and almost none with anybody else. So I made a note in here that, like, we're pretty far into the movie. My count, it was like about 50 minutes into the movie is where this scene happens, where you just described. They're trapped on this vehicle with this old couple who seemed like they were helping them, and they're actually taking them to auction them off. And Tom cracks open this hatch and he has a chance to jump out, but Hester's injured. She's like, I can't go. You got to just go, get out of here. And he thinks about it and he goes, no, I got to stay with you.
I'm not gonna.
It's not done that well. It's also just weird and corny, but I was impressed. I was like, this is the first interesting story choice from one of the main characters. Like, everybody else just kind of does obligatory stuff or acts out these sort of stereotypical roles like they seem to be. I'm like, oh, okay, they just made a character make a hard choice on behalf of somebody else. And I didn't feel like his concern for her was really earned at this point because their chemistry is kind of not there. But still, I was like, okay, the story did one thing, but it took him 50 minutes to do it.
And it like continuously kind of fails to capitalize on moments like that by putting a lot of other characters in between Hester and Tom, or at least like around them. They're rarely alone from this point on. Fang's always there, or her homies at Airhaven. There's just not a lot of room for that kind of very basic and early stage love story to flourish.
The writing's not that good. So it's hard writing a romance where you put two strangers together who are initially opposed, or one of them's like, I don't need you. You're a hindrance to me. I don't care about you. I have my own goals. And to try to actually have them turn into a romance where they love and need each other by the end, that's not easy. You have to be skillful to do that. And this movie goes through the motions. They save each other. And it's nice to see that Hester is not just a scowling meanie, that she actually like throws him a rope in this scene where they're trying to escape both the slavers and Shrike, who are fighting them at the same time. So that was the next choice that follows from Tom staying with her. And she's like, he stayed with me. Let me save him from my crazy robot zombie cyborg dad.
I'm reminded a little bit when we talk about that it's not really a well-written romance of the Evangeline, Lily, and dwarf romance subplot from the Hobbit trilogy that made me want to stab my eyes with a battle axe. So maybe Jackson and Walsh and Boyens just can't write romance.
Yeah, maybe they don't have that.
You know, Arwen and Aragorn, there was more in the text to kind of pull from.
Right.
Whereas the Hobbit one was completely fabricated, and I don't know enough about this book to speak to it, but I'm just not sure that's their wheelhouse.
Yeah, so do you think the action part is their wheelhouse? Did you like the action of the slave market escape?
It wasn't bad. It was one of the more like kinetic sequences in the movie, but a lot of it has to do with Shrike's there. You know?
Yeah.
He shows up and shit goes sideways every time. He moves the plot forward. He makes things happen.
He does.
It has like a storytelling device. He's way better than anything else.
Oh, thank goodness. The story man is here to move us ahead. They try to make Anna Fang an impactful character who kind of stands out. She's just barely tolerable. I think Jihae, the actress, is pretty good, but it's a character that's like way too cool for school. And thankfully, she kind of underplays it, because otherwise it would be pretty annoying.
Yeah, you're talking about the Matrix. Like, her whole vibe is pulled from the Matrix, but she's like the only one dressed like that, which makes it feel like even weirder.
Yeah.
You know?
It's the only one wearing sunglasses in the whole movie.
And just like the spiky hair. She was good on Succession. Like, I don't think she's a bad actress, but
Oh, okay.
I guess she's their kind of bridge to Airhaven is her purpose. Like, she gets them to that point and kind of lets them team up with the whole squad there.
Yeah.
But what's her motivation for all this? I knew she knew Hester's mom. Is that
That's
it?
what it is.
But she looks like 5 years older than Hester.
I know. A lot of it doesn't work. It's again like the movie's giving you all the information that should make it work, and yet it doesn't sink in. I only picked that up on the second watch. She's supposed to be the emotional bridge between Hester and Hester's mom, who she lost at a young age, and so she doesn't know that much about her. And then this woman's like, your mom was the bravest, the greatest woman I ever knew. And like, it's supposed to be this like, oh my God, I'm connecting to my past. I'm finding out who my mom was. She was somehow networked in with these anti-traction rebels who fight the big predator cities. But none of that stuff kind of connects. Like, I realize she says that in the following scenes after they get safely aboard her ship, but kind of doesn't sink in like so much of the movie.
Just for the record, Hera Hilmar is a year older than Jihae.
Okay, that's one reason why it's hard to buy. The Fang character's weird, and she's supposed to be this badass, too cool.
She is. She does kill Shrike, which is pretty badass.
Yeah, she does a lot of good things. And she does the one cool kill. There's a couple cool kills maybe in this movie.
Cool kills. Do we have a thing for that?
No, I haven't made one.
Okay.
We can just pretend
Yeah,
we have one.
I'll do the voice every time. And
yeah, we just pause.
Bleed 'em.
You could do it manually. But the scene where she starts shooting up the slavers is the most violent part of the movie because it's pretty PG-13. I'm assuming it's PG or PG-13. I didn't actually check the rating.
It's PG-13, yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty safe movie. She blows one guy's head off with a shotgun, but they cut away and then you only see like his wig float to the ground.
That was a cool shot. I did enjoy that.
She unleashes some actual brutal violence. And then she has this knife that pops out of her boot, like a blade, pops out of the heel of her boot, sticking backwards. So then she does this scorpion kick, brings her heel around and drives the knife through the forehead of the guy she's wrestling with. And again, they do a very toned down, safe version of that. But I was like, oh, cool kill.
Cool kill. Cool kills. Yeah. We could have used more of that. Like, the action scenes don't have a through line. This is a hard concept to put into words, but there's no like stylistic consistency between the action scenes where you feel like people in this world fight this way. They use these type of weapons. They do.
Right.
There's no, that's a good way to do world building without dialogue, is to show like just the way violence happens in this world.
Sure.
It's different in every scene, even though like the same characters behave differently in different fight scenes. And it's just hard to get a grasp on like how war happens here or how skirmishes happen and how they're resolved.
Yeah. It's of a piece with what we were saying. Everything in this movie, even if the filmmakers thought they set it up, it feels dropped in your lap. It feels like, oh, this is a new thing. And I guess there's airships now. And I guess there's shotguns. And I guess there's martial arts.
You can't have steampunk without an airship that with a little flappy wings. That's steampunk 101, flappy wings.
Yeah. I mean, the flappy wing airships are pretty fun.
Does steampunk work in film? It works in literature for sure.
It's a good question.
But does steampunk work as a movie? I mean, I'm trying to think of some. What are some good steampunk movies? I guess you could say Treasure Planet is steampunk.
Yeah. Okay. So that worked.
Yeah.
That worked for us quite well, but it's a pretty rare example. And I actually thought of that same thing to myself. I pictured Peter Jackson and Fran and Philippa sitting around the table going, why isn't there a steampunk smash action hit teen movie? It's a big opportunity for us. And maybe there's a reason why, because it doesn't really like ignite audiences.
On a very base level. And I'm saying this as someone who's enjoyed many steampunk books, even, but the aforementioned China Miéville's Perdido Street Station is often held up as one of the shining examples of steampunk fantasy literature. But it's just kind of fucking goofy, isn't it? Like everyone like, oh, it's cool. You got a monocle and like your hat has a little like gear on it. That's awesome, dude. It's kind of dorky.
It's hard to play the middle ground, I think, because the China Miéville stuff is dark and edgy and literary. It's on the heavier side of sci-fi, right? So like you don't go, oh, this is getting silly. What's with the monocle, buddy? And Treasure Planet's on the other side. It's Disney charming and the characters are...
It's also got some scary fucking moments too, though. Remember,
it has some good scary moments.
Long John Silver in that movie was pretty scary.
That movie's executed at a high level, so everything is really good in that. But it's also, the silly parts are okay because it's animated characters. It's a freaky animated spider and it's weird and it can be really scary, but it's also like, it's Disney animation. You allow for things to get light in a certain kind of way there. This is in the middle where it looks really real. It's all photorealistic in humans. And yet some silly stuff's going on, including, once again, it works for Shrike. Shrike's kind of silly. You get in close to his face and he's part metal and he's part rotting flesh and he's just weird and his eyes are goofy, glowing eyeballs, but it still works.
I'm sorry. Shrike's the man. Like I just love him. He's the best.
It should have just been a Shrike movie.
Can we have a prequel? Just like Shrike and Hester going on adventures when they're like a little team.
I would actually watch that.
His motivation for wanting to murder her is like, she said she wanted me to. Like,
it's such a weird dad thing. It's like, honey, you promised. You said you were going to get this procedure where I kill you and turn you into a emotionless robot.
If we don't keep our promises, what kind of example are we setting?
And then he's just the angriest dad chasing her down the rest of the movie, killing everybody in his way.
Just screaming, Hester!
Yeah, he's so pissed. It's funny. It'll be funny. We'll talk about how it wraps up in the end, because that's kind of silly too, given everything that we've seen in this middle part.
Yeah. Did you want to talk about your homie, Beavis Pod, for a second? That name.
Oh, man. So we've left out, we've talked about 2/3 of this movie so far. We've left out the fact that the big villain, Daddy's Valentine, has a daughter named Kate. She befriends a guy named Beavis Pod, an Irish mechanic on the lowly underclass of London, and she's from the upper class. And there's a whole YA storyline that has no purpose in this movie, so we don't even need to talk about it.
Does this London have neighborhoods?
It definitely has some, upstairs, downstairs stuff going on.
Whoa. Oh, this movie's PG-13. Oh, you mean different levels of society?
Of society, yeah, class. But they're just throwing out really quick nods to all that stuff, because this guy's just pissed about being a lowly mechanic. And of course, I can't talk to the pretty blonde daughter of the vice mayor or whatever. But it's all for nothing happens with that storyline. We literally didn't need to mention them unless we want to make fun of them, because they end up having sort of a plot mechanical function where they shed light on the secret project that her dad is working on, which he's called a power project, but it's actually a super weapon that he's going to use to destroy the mystical city that we didn't really know about.
He's basically Oppenheimer.
Yeah, he's M becoming death.
EM become death.
So then they have another one of those things where the guy and the girl, one of them's rude to the other at the beginning, and they end up becoming good friends and surviving adventures together for not they do see what his project is and find out that it's the super weapon, but they're totally separated from the other two young heroes, and the other two young heroes figure all of that out at the same time without ever having to find it out from their friends on the ground. So
what was the point?
There's literally no point.
They're literally there to tell the audience about it.
Yeah.
Which is bad writing. There's got to be a way where you can have something revealed to the audience and characters at the same time in a way that matters.
Or just to be filler, hey, this is a YA story. We've got to have more romances, more boy-girl relationships. And in a book, you have time. You can develop more characters, more settings, go deeper on who these people are and give them all little arcs. But it's too much. It shouldn't have been in this movie. It should have been cut out.
I'm losing steam, man. Let's finish this up, because this movie sucks.
Here we go. In Airhaven, Tom and Hester meet Anna Fang's allies from the non-mobile city of Shanguo, which sits protected behind a great wall and enjoys lush natural resources. Together, they figure out that Valentine's plan is to attack Shanguo's wall with a powerful weapon technology called Medusa, which he built using an artifact that he stole from Hester's mom. Suddenly, Shrike attacks and destroys Airhaven in a big battle while trying to capture Hester. But when Shrike sees Hester defend Tom with her life, he's swayed by the power of love. Shrike drops his vow to make Hester into a zombie, and then he dies from his wounds. Then our heroes rush to warn Shanguo of London's impending attack. But Valentine drives up and zaps a big hole in the wall with Medusa, and things look bad. Just then, Hester realizes that the necklace that her mom left her contains the kill switch that will shut down Medusa. The heroes launch a counterattack by air and successfully shut down the massive weapon. In crazed desperation, Valentine tries to ram London directly into Shanguo, but Hester and Tom foil his last-ditch attack, and Valentine dies in the fight. Shanguo is saved, and Tom and Hester fly off in Anna Fang's airship to explore the world together.
All right, so it's time for John's trope pet peeve corner, which is the thing they needed all along was in a sentimental item given down by a dead parent. You're leaving so much up to chance that she just happens to investigate this necklace at the last minute. It's such a fucking lazy, boring way to reveal it.
It is one of those totally random, she's just staring at a carving on the wall in this city that she's never been to, and there's an eye that looks like the pendant she's got from her mom, and it suddenly all clicks in her head. And it's okay, she didn't really earn that. But then my other problem with it, she didn't need it.
That's not how they shut down Medusa at all.
I mean, she does use it, but the thing is, they have to fly airships with guns over there and attack St. Paul's Cathedral anyway, which is where the Medusa is built inside of St. Paul's. And it's they could have just gone in there and attacked it with wrenches, right? Once you fought your way inside, why not a grenade or smash it with a hammer? Why do you need the kill switch to deprogram it? I didn't totally get that.
Right. I mean, if it's really running off a computer hard drive, just throw a magnet at it.
And it was super hard to get running. The whole thing, it was so hard for him to resurrect this old technology, and they had to find all these pieces and feed it just the right power system and all this stuff. These are the kind of villain devices that you just have to throw a monkey wrench into, and you would think it kind of breaks down.
I also wanted to call out Shrike here because I feel like he's being a little disingenuous when he's literally about to die and he's like, I've decided I'm not going to kill you. It's like, Shrike, you can't even stand up. Like, I don't think you were that much of a threat anymore, but thanks, I guess.
He really chills out. He really does a quick turnaround there. His highlights go out and you can see his real eyes for a second. And he's like, you love him, which is, it's super unbelievable. We still love Shrike, but like her performance where she's like, no, you can't kill Tom. You can't. And he's, oh, this means you love him. Then you will not be sad and I don't need to kill you. And he does kind of talk like that.
No, she just wants you, like, you can not love somebody, but also want them not to be murdered by a crazy robot zombie.
That's true.
So I feel like he's making a couple leaps there, but I guess he does know her.
And it made me ask, which I was kind of asking the whole time, like, this is your dad. Yeah, he's mad. Yeah, he's trying to get you to live up to this promise. Once we know it's a promise and not just a death warrant, confront the guy instead of, she's constantly throughout the movie running for him and dozens of people are getting killed in her wake.
Whole city's destroyed.
Yeah, her dad's trying to catch up to her and she's just like dodging him. And it's like, hey, it's your dad. You kind of need to deal with this guy.
Right.
He's fucking a lot of shit up.
Just go have a chat with your pa. You could save so many lives.
And then when she does, it's like pretty easy. She's like, Dad, no, I like this guy. Don't kill him. He's like, you do? I'm so sorry. What was I thinking?
You said that Shrike is like her dad, but he's not actually her dad. And I love that the reveal of who her dad actually is so fucking stupid. You didn't even put it in the synopsis.
No, because
we find out in the third act that Valentine's her dad. Whoop-de fucking do.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't come up again. Like she doesn't have a meeting with Valentine's other daughter. What's her name? Catherine?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I didn't realize that she has a sister.
That's Catherine.
Yes.
There's no scene between her and Catherine where they're like, oh my God, we're sisters.
No.
They don't do any reckoning about this whole reveal except Esther goes, no.
Yeah. It doesn't change in the moment because they're in the middle of this fight to the death. Doesn't really change, except maybe she refuses to be the one to kill him. She kind of goes, oh, I'm getting out of here. And then Tom is the one who sends him to his death. So maybe it changed that, but it doesn't. Usually when there is a reveal like that, you're supposed to flash back through the movie, at least in your head, and go, oh my God, everything takes on a new meaning. But it doesn't, because you basically knew that he hung out with her mom. You already knew what he did to her mom and what he did to her. So yeah, we already knew he was around. He could have been her boyfriend or her dad, or it doesn't really change anything.
It's kind of a nothing reveal, which is almost how it's played. It comes and goes so fast. They don't dwell on it, which could almost be to their credit, but then why include it? Like
there's almost like in the moment after her scream and they kind of go back to fighting, there's kind of a look on Hugo Weaving's face like, okay, I kind of had to tell you that. Let's keep going here.
It's not a good movie, man. I mean, Bespin, or I'm sorry, Airhaven is kind of a cool setting, at least. And watching it, like when it's getting destroyed, it's even cooler because of the logistics of a floating city.
It's held up by all these ragtag balloons of something lighter than air that's holding it up, and they start burning and the whole superstructure crashes to the ground. I still kind of enjoyed some of the visuals. If people would have stopped talking, I could have just looked at that, gotten more enjoyment out of the movie.
I had my issue with the scale of it. Again, like I had a really big issue with the scale of Airhaven versus the airships landing on it, because when they're approaching it, I'd say Airhaven looks maybe 20 times the size of Fang's airship, but we're to believe that there's like dozens, if not hundreds of airships parked there and people living there.
It's squishy like all the other scale issues are. It's up and down.
But I do love a floating city.
It was nice. Speaking of Bespin, there's a lot of Star Warsy stuff in this end sequence. They do a full-on steampunk Death Star battle.
Steampunk Death Star is a good band name.
It's kind of cool. It's not a bad idea, but like they fully have a ragtag group of pilots. One of their airships is totally like a B-wing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm a nerd. I know what you mean.
And they've got to take out a bunch of turrets on this impossibly large ship, and then they open up a thing, and Tom has to fly Fang's ship into the center of it and blow up the reactor. And he's suddenly kind of the most amazing pilot in the universe, right?
Yeah, he turns the targeting system off and does it just by the force. No, they explain it in the beginning that he used to bullseye womp rats in his T-16 back home.
Oh, of course.
No, yeah, there are some throwaway lines where Fang lets him pilot her airship and he's kind of knows what he's doing. And she's like, wow, you know how to fly. And he's like, yeah, I've done it before. Okay, very cool. Good writing.
I actually caught, on the second watch, I caught one thing near the beginning when you're first meeting him. Someone tosses off a line about, oh, you're a historian. Weren't you the guy who was going into pilot school? And he's like, yeah, I changed careers or something. Something really dumb like that. But it certainly doesn't explain why, yeah, he's the greatest fighter pilot in the universe all of a sudden in the end and does this miraculous feat of flying skill to stop London.
Not to mention, I mean, we already talked about the dad reveal, but that's very Star Wars.
Yeah, it's a very Star Wars third act now that we break all this stuff down.
They do some Lord of the Rings in the first and some Star Wars in the third, and the middle is just Shrike going nuts. So.
It's good stuff to borrow from if you can do a good job at it. We wish they did a little bit better job.
How did Peter Jackson, of all people, fail to borrow from Lord of the Rings? It's his fucking movie.
You never know. We have to speculate, like, how close did the finished version stick to the script that they wrote?
I have a hard time imagining like a studio taking a film away from that trio of writers. And they were all producers on the film as well, obviously. So
yeah, I guess you would think that they would still have, if they had chosen to stay closely attached to it through production, unless they had moved on to work on something else and left their guy in charge and he messed it up. Who knows?
Peter Jackson was digging through the Beatles archives already.
Right. Yeah, he might have been a little distracted.
Oh man, I hate this movie. Are we done?
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
All right, that was Mortal Engines. It's not the best. It's not the worst movie we've ever covered, but it's up there.
Yeah.
Top 5, I would say, probably.
It doesn't have any of the offensive grossness as some of our ones that we notoriously hated a lot. We were really mad at because they grossed us out or they just did things we estimated were morally wrong. This movie does nothing morally wrong. It just disappoints because you just can't care about the characters in it.
It's an incredibly boring film. And just, I've said this about other movies in the past, but I don't know that I've ever felt it as strongly as I do now, that it leaves you immediately.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember things that happened while the credits were rolling.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, who's that guy? Oh, shit. So just one of the most forgettable movies we've ever covered. And it cost $150 million, which is just insane. I love that it lost more than its budget.
Wild.
I mean, it's possible for sure, since we know how movie marketing works, but it's rare.
It's hard to do.
You probably couldn't do it if you tried, but here we have one of the accidental examples. Almost a 200 million club member, which like the Lone Ranger and John Carter, maybe?
Okay, yeah.
Is it as far as that goes? Maybe The Flash when it's all said and done?
It could be a contender.
But it's pretty mind-blowing how much money this movie lost. But I hope it didn't set back Christian Rivers' career at all.
Yeah, what has he been doing?
Oh man, it set back his career. He hasn't done anything.
Oh.
This is the last thing he did. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about Christian Rivers. He had been working with Peter Jackson since Brain Dead, or Dead Alive. The American version, I think, is Dead Alive, and the original version is Brain Dead. It's very small differences between the two, but I think Brain Dead's a little gorier, just saying a lot. So I've seen Dead Alive, and it's pretty fucking gory. But he's been a jack of all trades for Jackson. He's done storyboards, special effects, visual effects, and some second unit directing. He did second unit directing on Pete's Dragon, which was a David Lowery movie. David Lowery, of course, the director of The Green Knight, which I loved.
Oh, yeah. Very cool.
He's been attached to a remake of the war movie, The Dam Busters, since 2008, which is another Jackson pet project he got the rights to and was going to let Rivers direct it. But I think those rights expired before Jackson got to make that.
Okay.
The only thing Rivers has going on right now is he's attached to direct a pretty trashy sounding movie about the Malaysian airline Flight 370, dramatizing a recent tragedy.
Yeah.
He would never do that in Hollywood. No, the submersible movies are already in pre-production, I'm sure.
I bet.
But it's called Into Thin Air. I probably won't be watching it based on Mortal Engines.
He dug himself a big hole here.
Yeah. Hera Hilmar, she's been working, not super prolific, but she was on that show C.
Okay.
I'm so sick of these fucking shows. Their stupid ass names. Can I get on my soapbox for a hot minute here?
Sure.
The show C, S-E-E. If I want to Google something about that show, what the fuck am I supposed to type? Just like the show From that I'm watching now. I'm like, and that's a show where you really want to Google stuff because it's a mystery box show. You're like, I want to read about From TV show. And they're like, oh, 9,000 results. And you got to scroll 15 pages. You know, like you have to narrow your search down to such a degree that by the time you find what you're looking for, you're already forgot what your question was.
Those are funny.
It's fucking infuriating. Anyway, she was on that show for 3 years, recently canceled by Apple. I think that was a huge budget show and nobody watched it. I've never met a single person that watched the show C. She did some Icelandic short films, probably with Bjork. Can't do anything in Iceland without Bjork getting a piece. I think she's like a crime boss in Iceland.
Exactly. Yeah. She wets her beak, as they say.
She got to wet her beak. But I could also see her literally doing it. Like when she goes to make her collections, she has to dip her nose into a little bit of water.
She's got a swan beak that she dips.
Don't mention Bjork and swans around me again. Do you remember that story?
No.
What? I told it on the pod where I was on mushrooms and we were watching SNL and Bjork's swan dress came alive and started attacking her.
Okay, yeah.
I thought for years that I imagined it, but then I found it online and it was a real thing that happened.
Yes, it's all coming back. Okay, yeah. That could be upsetting.
Robert Sheehan, who plays Tom, he's been on the Umbrella Academy since 2019. So that's a big show that people really like. I haven't checked it out, but I know I should.
Yeah, I watched the first season. I recognized him from that. I wouldn't say that like he stood out as like a character that won me over from that, but I think he does a good job on that.
Okay. He's Also appeared on The Last Bus, which is a show, I guess, but I'm not familiar with it. He was on 3 episodes of that in 2022.
Okay.
And he'll be in Red Sonja. I guess they're making a Red Sonja movie.
Oh, wow.
Late this year, early next. It's in post-production already.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah, I wonder. Does Red Sonja have any cultural footprint right now? Are people gonna... If you make a good movie on its own merits, I don't think you need to tie it to the IP so strongly.
I feel like you're kind of starting over where people will go, oh, yeah, that's a thing, but they won't necessarily have any attachment to it.
Kind of like Speed Racer. I knew Speed Racer was a thing that had existed, but I wasn't really into it. But then I love the movie. Movie rules. So that's what he's been up to. Hugo Weaving. He's only been in 4 movies since this one. And I feel like he used to pop up and stuff nonstop. So maybe he's getting older, slowing down.
Yeah. Is he doing... I feel like he's ripe to do something really interesting in prestige TV.
Are you actually looking at the note?
No, I didn't. I only scrolled down after I said that. What did I hit on something?
He's going to be appearing on season 4 of Slow Horses.
Oh, okay.
Which I am very intrigued by Slow Horses. I haven't watched it, but Chris Ryan absolutely loves it. And that's about as shining of an endorsement that you can give for something for me.
Yeah.
So I will probably check it out at some point. He's also been on Australian drama Love Me.
Okay.
And he got some critical acclaim for his performance in Hearts and Bones, which I'm not familiar with, but there's some awards chatter around his performance in that. I think that was 20.
Oh, okay.
So he's still doing it. And like we mentioned, Jihae hasn't done much acting. She was originally a model, now more of a singer than anything else. But she was on the show Altered Carbon on Netflix, which I watched the first season of. And she had a very small role on Succession as someone on Kendall's team, like PR people.
Oh, I see.
And she was good in that. So none of the performances in this movie were like offensively bad. I feel like, honestly, Hester's performance is maybe the worst.
Yeah, sadly, I wanted to like her, but she's kind of one note, which is scowling. And I like to think that the actor is capable of more, but didn't really shine in this.
Do you want to hear what we're doing next?
I do. I'm very curious.
You don't even know.
No.
I haven't updated the spreadsheet. I was keeping a surprise, not because I'm lazy.
Okay, lay it on me.
We are going to be covering for the first time one of our generation's top directors that we have not discussed on the pod at length.
Ooh.
We're going to be doing Inherent Vice by Paul Thomas Anderson.
Oh, wow.
Which I've somehow never seen.
I have seen part of it. I stalled out somehow, but now I have the motivation to go back and attack it with renewed vigor.
I will say I'm not a PTA acolyte. I enjoy a lot of his movies very much, but there are other ones that I don't. So he's not just a sight unseen, I'm going to love this movie guy for me, but something about this cast and this subject matter and kind of like the noirish aspect to it makes me feel like it's going to be in our wheelhouse.
Yeah, this is like Malibu noir, right? Like it's some kind of twist on noir through the lens of PTA. It sounds like a really interesting place to go. Excited to check it out.
And I did really like Licorice Pizza, so I have goodwill towards him currently.
Let's hope this one keeps that up.
Strangely, we could do almost any PTA movie we wanted.
Oh, wow.
These movies don't make money, but studios keep letting him make movies because it's like you got a PTA movie on your docket now. You're going to get awards chatter out of that.
He's a special filmmaker, whether you resonate with him or not. Do think he's a tremendous talent.
Absolutely. I think he started his career off absolutely on fire with Hard 8 and Boogie Nights, like just 2 all-timers for me. And I can't remember what came next, but I'll find out when I start researching for this episode.
We'll get into all that.
So thank you guys so much for listening. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe to the pod. You can follow us on Twitter at BlastZonePod. Also, I tweeted out a picture of our special guest from last week, Small Cat. If you guys want to see what she looks like, check the Blast Zone Twitter.
Getting a lot of likes.
She's very cute. I know she's my cat, so I'm biased, but she's adorable. She's so soft. You guys can't pet her, but she's very soft. And she does the thing where if you go to pet her, she gets excited. So she like slams her head into your hand before it gets there.
Yeah,
which is like just one of the best. What else was I talking about? Oh yeah. You can email us at blastzonepod@gmail.com for any suggestions, feedback, movie suggestions, new segment suggestions, old segment suggestions, cat pictures. We'll see you next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
The Blast Zone.